Right here with Red Sox hitting coach Pete Fatse. I guess just two dudes talking hitting. I think that's how we're going to call this segment. But you can't talk baseball in 2026 hitting without mentioning driveline training. So when I say that phrase to you, what does it mean?
Yeah, I think it's they've kind of pioneered this kind of data-driven kind of mentality in terms of how you evaluate players. And obviously looking at enhancing strengths, but also opportunities to further develop, and that's really at any point in their career. So I think those guys have done a nice job, with the processes and how they've looked to identify traits that they can influence and how that shows up on the field.
I think early days, I always thought of it as like for pitchers, improve velocity and speed, but it's really dove into hitting. So true or false statement? Driveline is about launch angle and strikeouts are okay.
No, false. I think it's really, like I said, for me, obviously we have quite a few staff members that have worked at Driveline, and I think those guys they're very creative, they're very thoughtful, they're very intelligent guys, and for us, night in, night out, over 162, it's about putting runs on the board, right? And I think like a lot of the conversations that we have are, how do we consistently do that on a nightly basis in the big leagues, but also, how do we make sure we're not losing sight of the long-term goal for each player from a development perspective? And I think that's how we've embraced and worked together so far.
Now, you mentioned there's a lot of guys here who have been Driveline, come up through the training process. You have not.
No.
How has that been for you, incorporating that? Because I do think different voices help, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, my path obviously played a little bit and then got right into coaching. And I think that was, for me, I was more on the forefront of just exposure to technology, whether it was the basic ball tracking systems, so we had hit tracks, things like that, and basic biomech markers. So I got my hand into it pretty early, but I think a lot of it in your coaching career is really trial and error. You try and get an understanding of what information works for you as the coach, right? Where you can feel like you can make influence, and then ultimately what resonates with the player, right? So we have tons of technology, obviously, that's been around for a long time in camp, and really it's about what's going to give you the most bang for your buck with the player, right? So at the end of the day, it has to manifest itself with the player.
See, I wanted to talk to you about it because I know last year, obviously, the swing and miss was there, right?
Sure.
The strikeouts were there, and you see people talking, it's using the term, they don't know what it means, and it's sort of like, well, that's because Fatse is about Driveline, he doesn't care about swing and miss. But what I like when I hear you talk about, and by the way, the second half, the swing and miss did go down.
Sure.
I thought you guys did a better job with it. You start to focus on, how do we even get to two strikes?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
like that
exactly.
becomes the important part, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at Major League average player hitting with two strikes, I think the Major League average was 190, right?
Yeah.
So if you're getting to two strikes more often, chances are you're going to punch, right? So I think the mentality and the mindset for me is how do we put ourselves in the best situation before two strikes, while also you have to have an adjustment with two strikes as well, right? And I think, but the focus for us is how we're managing the bats with two strikes and making sure we've practiced, we've trained a plan that when you get to two strikes, you have a chance to execute.
And see, the reality, too, to me, is about if I had a team full of Yoshidas, Bregmans, Durbins, IKFs, you'd make a lot of contact, right? It still comes down to personnel to me, right? It has to. You have a guy with history of swing and miss. You're trying to figure out how to make that a little bit less.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you're, some of those things, those trends tend to follow players throughout the course of their career, and we're just trying to move the needle in those areas, right? So, you reduce somebody's chase by 3 to 5%. That's a pretty big margin, right? So, I think that's kind of where we put our focus, especially early on here when we're just looking at opportunities to make guys better.
So I look at guys in particular like Wilyer Abreu and Cedon Rafaela last year. I think Wilyer went from 28-29 swing and miss K rate to 24. Cedon came down big time
almost
as well.
20%. Yep.
So how big of a jump is it when a guy goes down 4 or 5%? And can there be another 4 or 5%?
Yeah, I think I think it depends on the player ultimately, but I think it's significant. You look at like Cedon's best months, right? He still swings a lot, and at times, right, the chase was there, but he was finishing at bats with really quality balls in play. So he did a great job executing. And I think he ultimately, as an example, he's a guy that kind of embraced some of the early conversations we had. And put a nice plan together and execute it throughout the course of the year. So
with that said about personnel, you have the team that you have. You have some contact guys. You have some guys that reduce some swing. This year, obviously, the Corps is even talking about it. How do we focus on that now? How do we focus on situational hitting?
Yeah, I think it's an emphasis, right? It's one thing to kind of talk about it. It's another thing to be very specific on how you practice it. And I think it's, if it's important, you make it important. So whether it's our BP rounds, the thing for me, we obviously spend a lot of time in the cage, we're working on our swings. Obviously, we're working through specific drill work that we're, targeting for each player. But then when you go on the field for BP, there's an element of hitting that has to take place, right? You have to put yourself in the box. You have to work through situations, and execution's really important. So putting a premium on execution in those situations in practice is the best way to do that. And then ultimately, when you step in the box and you have a game, like you've been there before, right? Yeah. So you take that with you into the game.
Every season's an up and down, right? You have good months, you have bad months, but overall last year when you look at it, the strikeouts were there, maybe it runs in scoring position, but first in doubles, I think second in average.
Yep.
Seventh in runs, maybe third in the American League, in that range. Yep. So it was still a very productive offense. Do you see the same thing with this group?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this group. I mean, obviously last year was last year, but the goal is still the same. We set the bar high at 800 runs a year, and how you get there is going to be different, right? And throughout the course of the year, you have your ebbs and flows. The slug comes and goes, but really putting a premium on getting on base and putting ourselves in position to score as many runs as possible. I mean, we led baseball last year with opportunities to drive in runs. It's just cashing in on those more so this year.
See, rivals can talk. Providence, UConn. We can sit here and still talk hitting. Thanks a lot.
That's exactly right.
Appreciate it, man.
No doubt.
Good luck to you this year.
Thank you.